Ricky Matthews. Ricky. Hey, man. Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
That's a lot better. Yeah, you could probably cut it down just a little bit. A little hot, but we got you now. Yeah.
Yes. Hey, listen, I'm very, very sorry that I didn't join you a few minutes ago. I had a little family emergency. Everything's okay, but I'll explain
good.
it to you when we get off the air.
No problem whatsoever, but glad that you got that worked out, and happy to have you join Middays. We wanted to talk to you today. I know you've been following the saga of Elon Musk and Twitter, and it seems like there are new developments every day on that front. What's the latest from your perspective? What do you think about all that?
Well, you know, I tell you, isn't it interesting how hyper-focused they are on Twitter? I'm saying, you know, mass media, compared to cuts that are being made in other organizations like Amazon and others. But I'm still basically where you and I were before. You know, I was actually looking at some of the data that I can actually find about what some of these cuts are doing to the company from a financial perspective, and you know what the latest is. But you know what, I think it's pretty clear what you and I talked about before, that Elon Musk came into an extremely fat organization, probably clumsy tactically and strategically. They were really hyper focused on moderation. They hadn't figured it out. They had costs out the kazoo. Did you see where one of the cuts that they were making, that he wanted to make, was $1 billion in infrastructure? Did you see that?
I did not.
I mean, it's incredible when you start to look at some of the requirements that he's asked his team to look at. But you're talking about, you know, $1 billion in infrastructure costs he wants to cut from.
Are you talking about IT infrastructure?
Yes, and this has to do with server costs and other costs that they had just run out of control. And I also was trying to figure out, okay, when there was an earnings call that happened before Elon Musk took over, where you may have heard they were trying to cut 25% of the workforce. And I was trying to figure out what's the value of 50% of the workforce or 75% of the workforce on an annualized basis. And that 25% of the workforce would have been $800 million. So if you look at just 50%, you're talking about $1.6 billion that they're going to cut from the organization. And then, you know, they I think $270 million lost in the first quarter, so they were on track to do $1 billion of loss this year. But, you know, he may get most of the way there through some of the cuts that he's making. Now, look, you and I both know when you go in and cut 50% of the workforce, or maybe 75% of the workforce, the institutional knowledge that you're losing is gigantic. But I think what he decided was this organization was so troubled and so not focused on making money that he's going to change the culture in one fell swoop. It's going to be short-term pain for long-term gain, and that's where he is right now.
It's easy to operate a company as a social justice warrior, activist, when the bottom line is black as hell. But it ain't so easy when it's red. Then all of a sudden, oh, geez, we actually got to make a profit here. And I think that's the reckoning that we're seeing here, Ricky. And it's not just Twitter.
I think you're right. I think that Twitter had forgotten what it was. First of all, it's a company that needs to make money. And if you go back and look at some of the early interviews that Elon Musk had, you know, he's really focused on trying to make Twitter much more than Twitter. He wants it to be an e-commerce site. He wants it to be about video. He wants all these other elements to it. But he comes into this incredibly fat company that, you're right. I mean, they were so hyper-focused on moderation. And you're right, too. If you look at a lot of the moderation issues they were having, there was a lot about social justice. I mean, most of the employees have become incredibly entitled, and they were acting accordingly. And so, you know, when he says sign the pledge to work hard, you can see the pushback he's getting. But, you know, he did the same thing at Tesla. He said the same things at Tesla. You're going to have to work hard. He said that Tesla could file bankruptcy at one point, as you know, when they were doing mass production. They had all kinds of issues. He literally slept at the factory for weeks. This is pretty much from his toolkit. And the reality is he knew He had to change a culture, and he wasn't going to do it incrementally. He had to go in there and profoundly change that company and focus it where it needed to be focused. And it's amazing the amount of costs that had been built into this company around the world, really. And now, the reckoning has happened. And you bring his vision with these cuts. Believe me, I don't think any of what he's doing is easy. But he, as we said before, he may actually pull it off.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point if just cutting expenses is sufficient for this company to remain viable and certainly to achieve any kind of measurable growth. There's the revenue side of that as well, and I know you know a lot more about that when you think about advertising being your main source of revenue, which is of course core to the media business. I'm just not sure it's there if that works. What do you think?
Well, it will be interesting. About 90% of his current revenue stream comes from advertising. The other is only like 500 and something million that's coming from licensing agreements and things like that. But he said in one of his interviews, he alluded to WeChat, which is a Chinese platform that you probably have heard about. But it is that's why he refers to this effort as App X. He kind of likes that X as in SpaceX. One of his kids is named X. But he calls this App X. What he's going to do is he's going to develop a super app that he's going to use. You think about, okay, other companies can go do this, but the reality is they have 238 million active users.
Right.
In the
that's
second
the value.
Quarter of 2000. Dude, that's a lot. And,
Hold on for a break. We'll finish.
Yeah.
Hold on for a break, Ricky. We're coming back. We'll continue this discussion. Thanks a lot. Ricky Matthews, host of Coast View and SuperTalk Outdoors, is our guest talking about Twitter and EOs. We've got Ricky Matthews, the host of Coast View and SuperTalk Outdoors, as our guest talking about Twitter, Elon Musk. So you like the chances. I can just sense it. Ricky, your attitude is that there's a new sheriff in town and the C-suite there. And making all the right moves. Had this 1 o'clock in the morning meeting. He did. I'm sure you saw the tweets on that. And had several of the engineers around him. My experience working in that world, that's when engineers do their best works, 1 o'clock in the morning, honestly.
But
listen,
I think the bottom line is I think Twitter was a poorly led company that needed transformation. And when you think about this whole notion of moderation and how they determine who's going to be on and off the platform and who gets to say what, this whole notion of free speech is a really important conversation. And as you and I discussed before, free speech is not, you can't just say anything. There are laws around that. But he's going to open up the kimono, as you and I discussed the last time we talked. The black box, as he discusses, is going to be there for everybody to see, the open source around that. So this notion of moderating it, behind some kind of steel curtain where no one could really understand the choices that were being made about who could be on and who could be off and what could be said and what can't be said. He said when someone you don't like says something you don't like, then he'll know that we've gotten to where we need to be. It's okay for us to disagree, and the reality is he's gonna let free speech be free speech, and that bothers a lot of people, but it's just the reality of what he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It kind of reminds me of the situation with burning the American flag. I don't like that. I would never do it. I don't condone it, but I support their right to do it. I mean, that's the nuance aspect of this that we've just lost in our society. We don't seem to. We can't.
There's a reality that you and I can't discuss something. Because if we say something that doesn't agree with the other side, suddenly we're a left-winger or we're a right-winger. We can't bring our own point of view to the conversation. And there were a lot of people in the Twitter organization that were involved in moderation that was literally trying to change the conversation, trying to force an agenda on the rest of America. And I think by doing what they're going to do, it's actually going to turn the mirror on Facebook and some other organizations and say, we expect this happened in Twitter. Now it's working the way it's supposed to work. We expect you to do the same thing. I think it's going to make a big difference. And incidentally, by the way, of the 400,000 verified accounts that they have, if you were to monetize 250,000 of those, that's only $24 million a year. So I think when he started looking at the numbers, he said, "Look, we're not going to focus on that right now. It's not enough money to make a difference. We're going to focus on costs." And then, as I mentioned before, we went to trap. Before the break, is that video chat and messaging and streaming and payments like the WeChat. Look, there's a lot of competition in that space. Google and Snapchat and TikTok and Uber, they're all trying to go there. But when you got a visionary like Elon Musk behind you, they're going to be much more than the Twitter we see today. And their revenue streams are going to be incredibly diversified when this is all said and done.
I would say, given his track record and his just ability to innovate and sort of see around the corner, which is what all good innovators possess, he's thinking of something that's a twinkle in his eye right now that we can't even comprehend. And I believe you're right. So if Twitter survives, it's because he will have transformed it in that way and will not rely on their traditional revenue streams. I think he's looking beyond that.
Yeah, you imagine in the organization that you ran in your entrepreneurial efforts, if you had a room full of engineers that were not aligned, that were not in some central location, but all over the place, going to whatever beat of the drummer was best for them. The reality now, they're going to be unbelievably aligned in the same way that SpaceX takes flight, in the same way that Tesla has begun mass production of electric vehicles. You're right. There are things that are probably in his head today that we don't fully appreciate, but he can't begin to even do those things, even think strategically or tactically in that way until he has an organization that is on board, willing to work hard and aligned. And it was not aligned when he came in. And man, when you can cut $1 billion, think about that, $1 billion in labor costs a year and still run that organization and have it be aligned. There's going to be something to watch. There are a lot of people betting against him, but I think he's going to pull it off.
Well, this all started, and we're about out of time here, but Jack Dorsey had a great idea, but was a terrible manager. Terrible manager. Right. Worst. Right. And so he got out of the way, but he didn't really replace himself with anybody that was any better. And so now we're off to the races with Musk. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And really appreciate you keeping up with that, Ricky, and sharing your insights on it. It's very interesting and like I said, just fascinating to hear about and fun to watch. And we got a lot more in front of us, that's for sure.
The ramifications of what they're doing there are going to affect everything about free speech that we've ever known about in the social media world. It's a big deal.
I think you're right. It's a good point. Ricky, good to see you. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, my friends. Appreciate it.
We are out of here today, out of time, back in the Element Wealth studios tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.